Hello and welcome to the Garden Show. Well, I've been looking at this area carefully. It's never really delivered for us. I'm starting to go off it and feel I need to have a few more flowers, perhaps some fruit trees in there. I think I'll get Bill Ward in and attack it in a couple of weeks' time. Because really, if you want to shift a plant, now is exactly the right time of year to do it. The general rule of thumb is, if a plant is fast growing, then it's more difficult to shift. It tends to sulk and become shocked by the shift. So you have to take all that into account. You also have to think about when to root prune, to wrench or not to wrench. Jack Hobbs joins us later in the show with a few pointers on shifting the plants. In a few moments' time, we'll be meeting a young Melbourne designer who's come up with some excellent solutions to small, dark, ugly spaces. And then coming up later in this week's show, we'll meet a couple of keen conservationists who have successfully established a plant sanctuary for Southland's endangered native plants. Bill Ward's at work, revealing a ruthless side in response to recalcitrant roses. And we'll introduce you to a new and waspish way of eliminating thrips. Another appeals so much to you, Jack.
Well, it's definitely a design style I like to represent, particularly at events like this, just because of the clean lines and the simplicity of it. I think you can get, some designs can be too complex and you just lose the impact because there are so many features. I think just having something soothing and calming to the eye without elements everywhere can be quite good.
So describe for me the key elements that characterise your designs.
The restrained use of plant varieties, clean lines, particularly in the hard landscape, using sort of industrial and natural materials, and definitely the use of water, both moving water and still areas, just to give a bit of motion and an interest in the courtyard.
But a lot of people are saying minimalist is boring. They're clamouring for colour and flowers. Why does it appeal to you?
Well, look, it's basically a response to clients' needs. I'm finding a lot of people, professional couples who work full-time, just don't want to have the chore of gardening. It gives a clean-lined look. It complements contemporary architecture, but also the low-maintenance aspect appeals to a lot of people.
When designing this tiny back garden, Jack's main consideration was the busy lifestyle and family needs of his clients, Zena, Evan and their baby daughter Mia.
Basically what we wanted was something that looked very attractive, of course, and simple, modern, to suit our home, but also to be really practical as well, and that's exactly what our garden's offering us. Yeah.
And Evan, for you?
Able to have another room extended to the home, able to have a shed with all the little bits and pieces in there.
It was a challenge to combine all the elements from a practical point of view whilst having it aesthetically working as well. We've taken a less is more approach again with the design, using consistency of colour with the 3 fountains in the charcoal colour, then the pebbles under the trees, the furniture, the feature wall and all the planters in the same grey colour.
Yes, cute little herb boxes there for Zena.
For the herb garden.
What about the trees? You've got 3 sorbus here. Why did you go so boldly for 3 when 1 might have done?
Look, I used the 3 trees because they bring an element of seasonal interest that you wouldn't get with normal evergreen shrubs that you typically use in a space like this. And also just to give the privacy from next door as well, and a bit of height to the courtyard.
And using just the bamboo and the planter, what was the idea there?
Well, the idea there was to use a freeform loose plant to contrast against the angular hard landscape here.
It kind of softens it up, doesn't it?
It does,
definitely.
yeah, loose and feathery. Yeah.
Now, this intrigues me, the feature wall. Why is it set apart from the boundary wall?
Well, the feature wall has been designed to reflect the trees, which are freestanding elements within the courtyard. And I feel that if the wall was attached to the boundary wall, it would just appear too heavy and you wouldn't get that sense of space and depth that the freestanding wall gives.
It's quite tall, isn't it? You didn't want to keep it as low as the boundary fence?
No, I think the element of height gives the courtyard sort of more of a sense of space, and it also reflects the tall, narrow growth habit of the sorbus.
Another much larger garden with problems needing quite different design solutions.
This is a rather awkward space. It's between the garage wall and the side wall of the house. What we wanted to do, because it's really a thoroughfare in the side of the house, is create some sort of intimacy and create a little courtyard atmosphere. What we've done against the garage wall is not tried to hide it in any way, but tried to break it up and soften it. The central feature is the water fountain done by a local sculptor with the stone and the stainless steel. and that's framed by the Chinese star jasmine on the stainless steel cables.
Why do you like symmetry so much? It works well, but what does it do for you?
Well, I think symmetry is important. It gives you balance, and having the central feature just gives it quite a lot of drama from the aspect from inside. And in a little courtyard space like this, the balance seems to work quite well. Again, we've used symmetry here by having a bench at either end of the lawn. We've integrated them into the garden with the use of the clipped box plants to follow the proportion and scale of the benches.
They're like little tables, really, but they really amalgamate the benches into the garden. Very cleverly done. And you, the self-taught man, I mean, 3 years in the business, 3 gold medals from various flower shows. It hasn't held you back not doing a design course?
No, I really have learnt a lot from the hands-on experience that I've had in nurseries and doing garden maintenance and my own landscape jobs from about the age of 14, actually. The part I enjoy about landscape design is that you're working with living elements, being the plants, and I enjoy the design process from the initial concept through to drawing the designs up and the construction side of it as well, then seeing the finished product at the end.
It's a perfect job for you.
It's fantastic.
Bill's along after the break with all you need to know about pruning and caring for roses. And Jack introduces us to a Southland couple who've established a sanctuary and community nursery aimed at preserving endangered native plants.
Ward, Bill Ward, your mission today, should you choose to accept it, is to restore order to our roses. Well, Bill, we've had this house for about 6 years. When we bought the house, the roses were already here. I'm a working mother. I can't keep up with maintaining the roses, and they've got away on us. And they've got every disease under the sun, and I hope you can help me fix them.
Your iceberg standards, which
Yes.
someone's brutalised in the pruning, and they've got quite a bit of dieback, need ripping out. Look at that. How can a plant live looking like that? Well, you can see here how deep it's been buried, and see how it's rotted away. There's not even any live Cambrian left there. So it's been slowly sort of cooked in the ground, so to speak. When you're replacing a plant of a similar species in the same spot, it pays to remove all the soil. There may be fungus diseases in there. So that's what I've done so far. We'll get some good garden mix in there and then plant our new rose. Now the roses we're using here are floral carpet coral, and it's a really free-flowering bush, and it'll flower all summer. It's important that that stays at the same level as your soil. Otherwise, we'll end up with what we've just replaced. And remember, once you've planted it, it's got to be watered.
So what's wrong with my roses in the pots there? As you can see, they've got powdery mildew. I've sprayed them with Shield and Gould, and I can't get rid of it.
Well, you're not likely to, because it happens a lot in the northern regions, you know, from Waikato north. I just find it's easier just to get a good dessert spoon of baking soda, dissolve that in a litre or so of water, and spray that on every 3 or 4 days. Usually it controls it. Now, don't be frightened about what I'm going to do, but that's one of the beauties of flower carpet, is that you can just... And that's it. Voila. Down the side, you've got 3 weeping standards. They're not doing well there because it's too shady. I'll give them a haircut, and you can lift them out and give them to friends that have got a bit of sunshine. After getting rid of the mass, it's really important to cut out all the dead wood. Making sure you don't cut too high into the crown, because that's where all the dormant buds are for regrowth for next spring. So you've got to be cruel to be kind.
That's my favourite rose over there. It always flowers. It's has very little disease, but you can see some lichen growing on the trunk.
And you don't like lichen?
Well, I'm in 2 minds actually. I know it's supposed to be a sign of good health, but it looks quite ugly at the moment.
Well, it's recommended lime sulphur to get rid of lichen and moss, but I can't stand the smell of it, so it's the old elbow grease. And you do it two ways. You can either use the brush and just wire brush, and it comes off really easy. And often it'll expose if there's any dormant buds there that may erupt and give you new growth like you have up here. On areas where there's no thorns and it is quite narrow, the good old Stilo pad is excellent. I believe this variety is Madame Alfred Carrier White. It's called a pillar rose, so it needs to be going up the tree and then it'll cascade out. It's a wonderful flower. These have got to come out. Anything that's diseased or damaged like that is going nowhere, and it needs a good feed as well.
I was going to say, no, so far as the food is concerned, what should I be feeding it?
Well, there are proprietary rose foods around, and they want to be applied early September, again late November, and again in February to make sure that you get those flush of bloom again in the autumn.
Well, Bill, you can see my fairy roses here. They're fabulous flowers because, of course, they do flower for most of the year. What I want to ask you about, though, is there's mites on the backs of the leaves. What do I do about that?
Well, in the autumn, it's quite prevalent. You'll get thrip, you'll get mites, you'll get a bit of scale. If you spray with all-season spraying oil, that's quite a good sort of clean-up. It's organic, so you're not that fussed on those nasty greeby ones.
Spray.
And copper oxychloride, which isn't a true organic, but very close to it, is a good one for just cleaning up all the fungus diseases.
And so when do I spray with that?
Once all the pruning's been done, once all the foliage has dropped away, clear up any of it, throw it in the rubbish bin, spray them with your copper, spray them with your oil 10 days later, and then in the spring, just as the buds are starting, you can give them an all-purpose spray.
Thank you, Bill. You've fulfilled your mission.
This is our image of Southland. Lush green pastures, incredibly productive. In fact, looking at it, you could swear it had been here forever. Go back, though, to when the Europeans arrived, and it probably looked like this. Tussock lands, native bush. I'm about to meet up with a dedicated couple who are doing everything they can for the native plants of Southland. Brian and Chris Rance have established a native plant sanctuary on their Invercargill property. They have been collecting seed, propagating and replanting their hearts out for the last 10 years. Well, I recall this as being just pasture. And what we've got now is the start of a little forest.
Yeah, that's right. We've got a few techniques to try and keep the grass down. We do a wee bit of spraying beforehand, and then we put weed mat down. Helps to keep the grass down for, just a wee while they're establishing.
A lot of that just actually looks like old sack to me.
Yeah, wool sacks.
Exactly what it is.
It's free.
Yep, recycling. And put it to good use, and it keeps down the mulch, cuts down on the weeding you've got to do, and any secret to cut down on the work makes it easier.
The idea is that the young plantation will eventually meet up with the bush margin. This is more than a hobby for our botanically minded couple. In 1999, the Rances were awarded the prestigious Loader Cup for their conservation work. They have a totally hands-on approach. I must say, pittosporum seed is horrible, sticky stuff, isn't it?
Yes, the worst seed to try and propagate. It's so sticky. What we do usually is just rub it in gravel, get the stickiness off. Fill up the trays with, it's just commercial seed raising mix, keeps the weeds out. And then I sow the seeds right on the surface of the mix. And then we just cover them over with pea gravel. And that just keeps them moist, keeps the soil seeds in.
Simple as that.
Yep.
This is where all the plant growing happens, but it's a nursery with a difference.
We don't charge for any plants. The plants are free to the people who come and do the work. And we supply the seedlings, or they provide the seed. They come and pot the plants up, and then they take them away for free. And it's just a way of encouraging everybody to grow native plants, mainly for restoration, but we don't turn anybody away.
Yeah. So your whole objective is to get more native plants out there?
Absolutely, yes. And Southland grown native plants that respond to the climate and things, yeah.
Numerous native plant species that are under threat in the wild are on display in the Rance's Endangered Species Garden. And I've got to say, some of them would look great in any home garden.
Here it is, the fragrant tree daisy, Jack.
Yeah, it's certainly a fine plant in the garden, isn't it? Just gorgeous, lacy texture.
Yep, you can see those really lovely, typical zigzag stems on it.
Yeah. Tell me, I mean, this whole garden, it's got heaps and heaps of plants, a massive amount of work, I would imagine. What is the purpose of it from your point of view?
It's a chance to educate people more about those. Most people, they know about the threatened birds, but they don't know so much about our special plants. Yeah, so that's the story we want to tell.
And if I'm not mistaken, over there we have the Cook scurvy grass, right?
Yeah, come and have a look at that. It's an amazing plant.
Certainly a fascinating story.
Yeah, it has got a very interesting story. And have you tasted a piece?
Well, as it happens, no.
There's another piece. A wee bit peppery, but quite tasty.
I imagine in a salad that would be quite a nice little addition.
Yep. That and some of the other native cresses Captain Cook collected for his crew for anti-scurvy. And since that time we've had slugs, cabbage white butterflies, possums, rabbits, stock, and they all love it. And it's almost gone from the mainland now. It's mainly on offshore islands.
And what about the pingiao? Now, this, of course, is a plant every Kiwi knows.
Yeah, it's a beautiful plant. The lovely orange colour. It was, of course, a major plant on the beach originally, and with marram grass it's declined a lot. And it was very important to Maori people as well. Here it is, our rarest native gunnera.
Weeny bit of a contrast to those giant South American things, isn't it?
Yep, this is the typical size, and here's the female fruiting stalks. And that's one of the special things about this plant, is it's got separate male and female plants, which is one of the problems for its conservation, getting the two plants together.
You've got to get Mr. and Mrs. and do a bit of matchmaking to get that, and then you've got some seed.
That's right, and they're in so few sites that it's just the seven sites that we've got in the wild, one of our rarest plants in Southland. The pond's starting to look really good now. The plantings are settling down and coming away, and yeah, it's great to see achievement, really.
Yeah, and the idea of this fringe of red tussock, Jack, is it's a characteristic plant of Southland, and it just looks fantastic in the wind. It gives us a view into the pond, onto the bush behind, and that's the reason we've got the tussock soil planted here.
Yeah, and just looking over there, I mean, most farmers like a good hedge, a bit of shelter for the stock, but you've done something a little different.
Yeah, we've really created a little bit of native habitat, and it serves the purpose of a shelter belt as well, but creates habitat for birds and looks attractive as well.
Well, you're still young, and you've already won New Zealand's Supreme Award for Conservation, which is just fantastic. But what does the future hold?
Well, I think we're trying to show an example, and seeing a bit more nature come back into an agricultural landscape is what we'd like to see. And we think that the native plants are what make New Zealand gardens and the landscape special.
And I think everybody can do it. Everybody can put a little bit of New Zealand into their garden. Yeah.
Chris and Brian's Endangered Plants Garden near Invercargill is open by appointment. And if you'd like to find out more about their community nursery, which I think is a fantastic resource, then you can visit our website, or we'll have details on the fact sheet. After the break, the DIY team show us how to make a wooden letterbox, and I'll reveal how you can plant up its roof to make it look fantastic all year round.
Oh, lovely garden.
Yeah.
Oh, letterbox is a bit of an eyesore, though.
As far as letterboxes go, that's definitely not number one.
So you can't salvage that, Mr. DIY.
Throw it.
So how easy is it to build a letterbox from scratch, then?
I don't know. Let's find out, shall we? Now, first of all, you should work out all the measurements of the pieces that go to make up the letterbox. Mark them all out before you start cutting. And once you've cut all the main pieces, you need to fine-tune them. Now, I'm setting the skill saw to 15 degrees because we're making an A-frame letterbox and we need to bevel the tops of our sides. That's so the roof will sit properly. And we also need to bevel the edges of the pieces that make up the roof to the same angle, 15 degrees. We're just trying all the pieces together, make sure they fit nice and tight, and then we'll be screwing and gluing.
But what about the back flap here, Rick? Wouldn't you want a couple of hinges so that you can open it nice and easily?
Now we're just going to put a couple of screws through the top here.
Oh, that's nice and simple, isn't it?
Now at this stage we're drilling some holes in our letterbox, then we're going to take it apart, glue it, screw it together. And remember to use zinc plated screws because they don't rust.
Good point.
For a small job like this, good quality PVA glue.
Hold it, Rick. Before you go any further, just let me paint the inside, otherwise I won't be able to get in there later. I'm using timber crewel, saves time, because no primer required.
Now while Kate's getting on with the painting, I'm going to make the post for the letterbox, and I'm going to be checking this bit of 4x2 into here to give it extra strength.
So you've got a bit more work to do on the back.
Yep, I've got to put a bevel on the top and a bevel on the bottom.
Why both?
Well, the top so as it can swing, and then the bottom so as you can get your fingers under it to open it. Yeah?
Shelf on, then the roof, then the back. One completed, nicely painted letterbox.
Remember our screws for the back flap? Time to put the roof on.
Now you may be wondering why we've added a rim to the top of the letterbox.
And there is a reason for that, as you'll see in a minute. Meanwhile, our letterbox cost us 60 bucks. Right, we've added a paver, a few river pebbles and concrete in our post.
To create numero uno on the street, and stay tuned because it's going to get even better.
And voila, here it is, a letterbox come alive. I've planted the roof out with a range of succulents and a mini mondo grass, but there's lots of other different plants that you could use if you wanted to give your letterbox a living lid. For example, the planters that I did a few weeks ago in Hypertufa of New Zealand ground covers, the biddy bid, the moss lookalikes, the raulia, they all combine together well to make a nice dense mat for the roof of your letterbox. But I've decided to go with succulents, and that's mainly because of the reeds. You'll recall that I'm a little obsessed with these reeds. I had planted them out 7 months ago and have done absolutely nothing to them in that period of time, and they have thrived obligingly for me. Mother Nature has rained upon them, and occasionally I've lifted out a few of the dead leaves, but really that is about it. So if you want the ultimate and low maintenance lids for your letterbox, I suggest you go with the succulents. So that's what I've assembled here today. You do need to be a little bit careful in your choice of succulents, I'd have to say. These ones here, of course, an embarrassment of riches. They are too large for your average letterbox lid, gorgeous though they are. This jade plant, for example, is just going to get way too large and unwieldy. So I've chosen some that I know very well from the reeds will stay compact. But to begin with, I thought it'd be kind of cute to have a rim of mini mondo, sort of like a fringe around the edge of the box. You'll see by these plants that you actually get great value for money with them. These can be split up, but because I'm into quick results, I'm basically going to leave these as they are, but if I wanted to, I could just pull off that little plant like that. Very ever so cute with its little blueberry. So you put those in, always use a good free-draining mix of soil on the roof. Don't take a shortcut with garden soil, because with a bit of luck, this letterbox lid will stay as it is, planted up, for probably about 5 or 6 years, with a little bit of variation thrown in. It's useful when you're thinking about planting up your letterbox lid to make sure that you've drilled drainage holes down the side to let the water escape, and you could even consider waterproofing it. Okay, onto the succulents themselves. Just looking down here, you'll see this little sedum here. It's a lovely colour, and it's about this size. Within 7 months, it's grown to that size. So I'm going to pop it in here, knowing that it's going to sort of come to about there over the next 6 months or so. This is a real little cutie, I think, as well. Succulents often change colour in the colder months and get a distinct red or dark pink tinge to them. So that's another bit of seasonal variation that's really rather welcome. Because I'm into quick results. We know this already. I'm going to put in some of these little succulents, which will look good for a few months, but then as the other plants tend to grow up, I can remove them because they are the expedient ones. You'll also notice that these sort of succulents will actually spread out and get a nice rosetti look in them. So I'm making those feature plants on either side of the roof. I quite like to combine things so that you get an en masse effect rather than too bitsy. And then, of course, the other endearing habit of the succulent is that it sends off little pups like this. So that's going to create its own little mini environment of one type of succulent in that spot there. Not a lot to be doing with it, apart from the planting up, obviously. Once that's done, they really need absolutely no care and maintenance. If you want to give the plant an even better chance of survival than it might otherwise have, I suggest you put a little bit of gravel around, because gravel heats up well and reflects off more light and heat, which the succulents adore. It also has the added advantage of keeping the leaves of the succulents up off the soil, which can rot them a little. You can use either fine gravel like that, or you might like to accentuate a feature plant by using some of these flat stones, which of course can be removed once the succulents grow up a little. So there you have it, an interesting way to enliven your letterbox lid. After the break, the Bugman introduces us to a waspish newcomer that's effectively eliminating thrips.
I'm looking for thrips damage. Oh, here's one. You see, you might know thrips damage from your garden because of the silvery leaves of rhododendrons and camellias. And here on citrus, it's not much different, really. This is thrips damage on the fruit. And most gardeners will recognize this damage on the underside of the leaves. The thrips pierce the cells and suck out the contents. The white ones are the larvae, the black ones are the adults. Now, in the home garden, you might be able to control it with Confidor or a very potent brew of All-Theme. And for those of you who are organically inclined, try some pyrethrum or something like repeated sprays with neem oil. But on a garden of this grand scale, like the citrus orchard here in Kerikeri, thrips numbers are huge and the problem is enormous.
Of course, you've got it on
Andrew
citrus.
Harty is responsible for pest management at Kerryfresh, New Zealand's largest citrus export company, as well as for 150 other suppliers throughout the country. How big a problem is thrips in, for instance, a citrus orchard?
Oh, it's really significant, Rude. They only cause slight cosmetic damage on the fruit, but that is enough to downgrade the value of the fruit by 75%. And nationally, we did an estimate a couple of years back for citrus and avocados that the cost or the loss of value of fruit and the cost of applying insecticides was about $6.5 million a year.
Hello. But of course there are other pests, but thrips on citrus. But this is one of the big ones, isn't it?
Thrips really upsets our whole IPM, environmentally friendly program because we have to use organophosphates to control it.
Oh, that's nasty. So those organophosphates would kill all the beneficials as well, I suppose.
Unfortunately, they vary what we call broad spectrum. They'll knock out all insects and so kind of sterilize the orchard.
So what would really be nice is if we could come up with something like organic or natural for controlling thrips.
Yeah, this sort of classical biocontrol where we go and find, a natural predator or parasite of the pest in its native country and bring it back and get it established here, that would be fantastic for us.
Well, in 1995, scientists here at Hort Research in Auckland imported a tiny, weeny little wasp with the name, wait for it, Thripobius semiluteus. Well, it comes originally from South America, and the idea is that that wasp would be a parasite of thrips, And here she is, the little wasp, magnified many, many times, strolling around a thrips colony. These thrips are larvae, but they start life as eggs.
The eggs are laid, in this case, under the surface of the citrus fruit. Now, they hatch into little larvae, little greebies, if you like. They do nothing but feed and grow. They change their skin once and become slightly larger larvae, the second stage, if you like. That changes into a pupa or chrysalis, which is the intermediate between the larva and the adult. But, Karen, where does your parasitoid come in?
Ruth, the parasitoid actually comes in at this first instar stage of the larvae, and the wasp comes through and lays an egg inside the body cavity of the thrips.
Hold on a minute. let's just see how that actually happens. The wasp's ovipositor or egg-laying tube is out, and zap! Got your little thrips.
The larvae just actually grows inside here. The first instar actually sheds to the second, even with the maggot growing inside it. And eventually, before it gets to the pupal stage, the parasitoid actually takes over the whole internal body of the host. And at this point, instead of becoming a white creamy coloured pupae, it becomes a black pupae, which is parasitized pupae.
Now, it only feeds on greenhouse thrips, nothing else.
No, Rude. We actually went through a long, long process of host specificity testing to make sure that in New Zealand it would only attack this species, because if it did attack anything else, in particular there's a native species that's in the same group, we wouldn't have been allowed to introduce it.
Well, you see, when you talk about a wasp, people think, you know, will it sting you?
No, it's tiny.
Okay.
You won't even notice it's on you.
And it doesn't eat kiwi and kokako.
Doesn't eat anything other than greenhouse thrips larvae.
So we're totally safe.
We're totally safe.
In the breeding room, Karen estimates she now has around 20,000 parasitized thrips pupae. They're brushed off the lemons onto sticky cards, which hang in the trees. And that's where the wasp hatches out, ready to start the cycle over again. This was the first time this wasp was released in New Zealand.
Oh, shame about the weather, eh?
Yeah.
Now, this is a momentous occasion. This is the day that Thripobius semiluteus is being released into the wild. All right, guys, how many tags?
15 in an orchard. There's about 5,000 pupae in there.
Whoa! And they're going to be tied onto your branches. You go for it. Just have a look at that. These things, do they fly to the next tree?
They can fly. They're not particularly good at flying. They tend to sort of hop more. You know, they can get about that far of foot hopping, but mostly will be wind blowing.
It's a long walk to Auckland, though, isn't it, from Kerikeri?
It's a long walk.
Hop, if you hop. Andrew, tell me what this would mean to you, short-term and long-term.
Well, immediately it should mean a reduction in insecticide use for us. Long-term, it means we're going to have better environmental conditions in the orchards. It's going to be safer for us. We don't like spraying. The insects that are beneficial to us will survive in the orchard and prosper.
Karen, where do we go from here?
From here, Rude, we're going to be looking at getting this parasite out as far as we can this season. We're going to be releasing in sites in Gisborne, Northland, Whangarei, Bay of Plenty. And then we're hoping in the next season to get growers together into small regions, small groups of citrus and avocado growers so they can rear them themselves and distribute themselves into the orchards.
How long do you expect it to take before home gardeners can reap the benefits of this release?
Well, we're hoping if they establish in the orchards and the surrounding environments that they'll actually move into the home garden within 2 to 6 years. It sometimes can take up to 10 years before they establish fully into the home gardens. There's also a possibility that you'll be able to buy the parasites as pupae from the garden centre and release them themselves.
Apparently the predator insect Thripobius won't be available to the home gardener for the next couple of years, but you never know your luck. If you're living from the Bay of Plenty north, 100,000 pupae have been released in the last couple of months, so one might fly on into your place. Unfortunately, here in the garden, we are not on the flight path, and our viraeas, which were very thrip affected, have managed to pull through, I think. We had to resort to chemical intervention. You could use neem or orthene or pyrethrum even to keep it under control. And judging by our fresh new growth and buds, our viraeas will live to bloom another day. After the break, Rud's back with a comprehensive rundown on ridding your garden of hard-to-get-rid-of weeds.